Chapter 7 of the Boy Scouts in the Blue Ridge. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kenneth Gaghan. The Boy Scouts in the Blue Ridge by Herbert Carter. Chapter 7. The Message of the Split Stick. A temporary halt had been called, and the scouts were consulting as to what new developments might mean. "Sure you saw a man, are you, Bumpus?" asked Giraffe, as though he had an idea the stout boy might have deceived himself. "'Twain't a rolling stone, now, I take it, or it couldn't have been a frisky little coon or possum, I suppose." "Well, what do you think I got eyes for? I don't know a biped when I see one," retorted Bumpus, indignantly. "He was as plain as anything, and make from one pile of rocks to another. You go with me back there, and I'll show you, Giraffe. Then you'll believe me when I say a thing." The two boys made a move as to carry out this project, only the scoutmaster put a stop to it. "Don't think of doing that, fellows," Thad said, quickly. "These mountaineers are a thin-skinned lot, as far as I've been able to learn, and they won't stand for any poking of your nose in their business. Besides, if it was a man, the chances are he would be armed, and you might bring a hornet's nest down upon our ears." "Oh, he did have a gun, all right," remarked Bumpus. "You didn't mention that before," broke in Step Hen, with an intake of breath that betrayed his excitement. "'Cause nobody asked me, and every one wanted to have something to say," retorted the other. "It was a gun, and an awful wicked looking one too. About as long as my staff, seemed to me." "Could have been Old Phin," suggested Allan. "How about that, Bumpus? Was he an old man with a gray beard?" asked Thad. "Nixie, that is, I don't know how old he might have been, but I'm dead sure he didn't have any beard at all, just a smooth face. But he was a regular mountaineer, all right, Thad, with the dingy old faded brown homespun clothes, the slouch hat, and the ragged pants that never came to his brogans. He saw me looking at him, for he put on a little spurt and dodge behind the pile of rocks, where, like it or not, he's squatting right now, waiting to see what we're going to do about it, and ready to speak to us with that trusty weapon if we try to rush his fort." "Well, we're going to do nothing of the kind. Just remember that," said Thad, resolutely. "It's only natural that the men of these mountains should feel a whole lot of curiosity about us. I suppose now they've never heard of the Boy Scouts, and these uniforms make them think we're connected with the army. Now we don't want to stir them up any more than we can help. They're an ugly lot, Bob here says, if you rub the fur the wrong way. We didn't come down here to bother these moonshiners one whit, and if they'll only let us alone, we want to keep our hands off their affairs. Let the fellow dodge after us all he wants. He'll find out that we're only a bunch of happy-go-lucky boys off for the holiday." "Pity we can't meet up with the old Phin, and tell him as much," Smithy went on to say. "Perhaps it might be managed easy enough," Allan observed, and all of them immediately turned toward him, feeling that he had some scheme to communicate. "Open up and tell us what it is, Allan," urged the impatient Bumpus. "Yes, don't keep us guessing any more than you can help," added Step Hen. "We sure got enough to worry us, what with the troubles of Giraffe getting stuck in the quicksand, and Davy here falling over every old precipice he can find, without you making us puzzle out a problem. How can it be done, Allan?" "Why, we'll send old Phin a letter," replied the other, calmly. "Show me your messenger, then," demanded Bumpus. Allan picked up a stick and deliberately split one end so that he could open it up. This he thrust into a crevice in the rocks close to the wretched road, and in such a position that it was certain to meet the eye of the tracker when he again started to follow them. "Now I'll write a few lines, and leave it here, addressed to old Phin Daddy," he went on. "I'll print the words in capitals, in hopes that any old mountaineer may be able to read as much as that. If he can't, then some other of the clan may. And if all else fails, to have some boy or girl make it out. How's that, Thad?" "Splendid, I should say," replied the scoutmaster, smiling. "Here, Bumpus, turn around and bend over." "What are you going to do to me?" demanded the short scout, suspiciously, as he hesitated before complying. "Is that the way you obey orders?" scoffed Giraffe. "A true scout should never ask questions. Them dragoons at the Battle of the 600 had begun to want to know the whys and wherefores of everything. Do you think we ever had any chance to declaim that stirring poem? Shame on you, Bumpus. Take a brace and obey blindly." "Oh, I only wanted to use your broad and steady back for a writing desk, so Allan could get his message written," Thad at this interesting juncture remarked, easing the strain, and dissipating all the fat boy's suspicions. When Allan had made out to complete his message, he read it aloud, and also let them have all a look at it, just as he said he would do. He had written it in the most primitive way possible, by making capitals of each letter. This is what he had done: "Phin Dady, we're a patrol of Boy Scouts, come down from the north to see the Carolina mountains. We do not mean you or anyone harm, but we want to be friends. We carry no arms but a single shotgun." "That ought to answer the purpose," remarked Thad, approvingly. "I didn't want to say too much, you see," observed the author of the message, as he fastened it in the crotch of the ribbon stick, where it must attract the attention of anyone who was passing. "First, I had a notion to mention Bob's name, as a former resident, and then I remembered that he said he didn't want it known that he'd come back, so I left that out." "And I'm glad you did," said Bob. "It would have done no good, believe me, and might have brought us into much more trouble." Again Thad saw him send that expressive glance his way, and his suspicions concerning Bob having another cigarette, which he had not as yet told, received further confirmation. "This, you know, fellows," remarked Allan, "is the way the Indians communicated in the old days. Only instead of writing it out as we do, they used to make signs that stood for men, campfires, rivers, woods, animals, trails, and such things. You remember? Thad here gave us some talk about it a while back. Now, are we going on again, since we've left our wonderful message for Old Phin?" "Yes, and perhaps we'd better keep somewhat closer together than we've been doing up to now," the scoutmaster suggested. "How'd it do for Giraffe here to stay behind and watch to see if the feller back on the rock pile gets the letter?" Bumpus proposed. "After we turn that bend ahead, he could drop down and creep back. Then, after he'd seen all he wanted, why, it wouldn't be any great shake for him, such a long-legged feller, to overtake the rest of us bunch." But Giraffe evidently did not like the idea of being left all by himself after that fashion. He looked worried as he waited to see what Thad would say, and was considerably relieved when the other shook his head, remarking: "Oh, no need of that, Number 3. It wasn't such a bad idea, though, come to think of it, and does you credit. I'm glad to see that you're waking up and beginning to work your brain more. But that message will get into the hands of Old Phin, all right. There's no doubt of that." "Did you reckon he'll take our word for it, or believe it's only one more clever dodge of the revenue men to get him when he's napping?" asked Davy Jones. The scoutmaster turned to Bob White. "How about that, Bob?" he asked. "Oh, Old Phin is narrow-minded, as you can easily understand," the Southern boy replied. "Besides, he had so many smart dodges played on him that he'll never believe anybody's word. Now, he may make up his mind that because we're only boys, he needn't be afraid. We expect to capture him, but all the same, we might poke around here, meaning to destroy us still. You can depend upon that Old Phin never makes friends with anyone that wears a uniform. That stands for an enemy in his eyes. But I'm hoping that he'll just conclude to let us alone, and go to one of his mountain hideouts to stay till we leave the neighborhood." They were by now tramping along again, trying to forget the ugly part of the affair. Thad had picturing in his mind what the home of Reuben Sparks might look like. He was a rich man, Bob had said, and in close touch with the moonshiners, though the government had never been able to connect him with any of the illicit stills that had been raided from time to time during the last dozen years. And so it was only natural to believe that he must have surrounded himself with some of the comforts of civilization while remaining in this wild region. Words let fall by Bob had given Thad this impression, as though they were going to be surprised when the home of little cousin Bertha was come upon. "I'd like to have a little talk with you, Thad." The scoutmaster was not very much surprised when he heard these words, and realized Bob White had caught up with him as he strode along, at the head of the little squad of boys in khaki. He just couldn't hold it any longer. what Thad whispered to himself. And now he's bound to let down the bars all the way, so somebody will share his secret with him. Turning upon the other, he said pleasantly: "Why, as many as you like, Bob. What's bothering you now? For I've seen you look my way quite some time, as though you wanted to speak. I guess you'll feel better when you've had it out." "Perhaps I may, though I'm ashamed to have kept it from you so long," answered the Southern boy. "Fact is, I tried to deceive myself into thinking that it couldn't interest or concern any of my chums. But now, since I've been thinking it all over, and we've run across old Phin, it looks different to me. And I'm of the opinion I ought to have mentioned this before I took the lot of you down into these dangerous mountains." Thad knew that it could be no trifling thing that would agitate the other as this seemed to do, and he steadied himself to meet the disclosure. End of Chapter 7. Recording by Kenneth Sergeant Gaghan.